Okay, if you have come this far, you have got a pretty good essay because this is the fourth round of revisions you've done and your fifth draft of your essay. It's probably getting pretty good. So, this is the last strategy I'm going to show you. You do these four things though, and you've probably covered a lot of ground. So, let's talk about what we've already done. We've added details, we've gotten more descriptive, and we've worked on showing instead of telling, like letting the reader make inferences. The last strategy I'm going to show you is, I think, one of the easiest ones, so I save it for last: varying the sentence patterns. This is a fancy way of saying some of your sentences should be long and some of them should be short, and you should mix short and long sentences together so that the pattern when people are reading it doesn't get boring. The other thing I like to do, and this is kind of like the next step, is work on adding some dialogue, like people talking back and forth. That's also a way of showing instead of telling. So you're kind of doing two things at once. So I'm going to show you a few places where I vary the length of my sentences, and I'm going to add dialogue in a couple of places too. If that's something you want to try, you'll know what it should look like. So just like I always do, my goal is to read through the essay, mark a whole bunch of places where I think I could do this type of revision. Then I'm going to pick three. Now, here's what I know about myself: 9 times out of 10, if I tell myself I'm going to do three, I get on a roll and I actually end up correcting more. But if you're feeling overwhelmed by revision, find three places in your essay to vary the sentence pattern and fix those three and then stop. At the very least, you've varied the sentence pattern somewhat and you have a better essay than you had before. All right, so just like I've done in the past with my other drafts, I'm going to start reading. I'm going to pick another color of highlight because there's still some things I've highlighted that I may want to look at revising before my very final copy. And then I'll go back and I'm going to tell myself I'm going to make at least three changes. Okay, when I was 7, I got a new coat. This was a big deal for me. I had never had a new coat before. I always got hand-me-downs from my older cousins. Both my parents worked hard at their jobs. My dad was a ditch digger for the gas company. My mom was a teacher. Not exactly high-paying professions. Okay, I'm already hearing that's like a lot of short sentences put together. I think I'm going to make these two sentences here, I'm going to make them a compound sentence. I'm going to make them one sentence with a conjunction in the middle later. This time I'm going to go with pink for my color. Not exactly high paying professions. My cousin's clothes were nice, but it wasn't the same as getting to go to a store and pick out something brand new that was just for me. That year, my dad got a bonus from the union at work, so there was a little extra money. My parents decided that the best use of I keep saying money, I'm going to change that word, the funds, windfall. Like to them, it was a windfall, I think. That means like a really surprising large sum. Was to get me a very nice, very warm coat from the Jones store. And if you don't know what the Jones store is, it's a department store at the mall. I'm just going to add a context clue here: at the mall. So even if you don't know that the Jones store is a department store, you could probably figure it out if I said at the mall. It was thrilling. I never got clothing from a department store. Let's italicize never to emphasize it. Now look at me. I'm actually doing more revisions than I thought. It's sneaky how that happens. My parents set 4 ground rules for buying the new coat. It had to be bought at least 2 sizes too big so it would fit for multiple years. It had to have a hood because the bus stop was freezing and I usually had to wait outside for what felt like hours. Whatever I picked out within the former 2 criteria, I was never to complain about my selection down the line. The coat could not cost more than $50. Mom took me to the Jones store in September when the grass was still dry and hot and the cicadas were still humming into the night. She wanted to make sure the selection wasn't picked over, and she wanted to be sure we had time to put it on layaway. Back when I was a child, you could pick out something expensive, then pay it off little by little, and eventually get to take it home. Okay, I think the explanation of layaway is maybe a place I could create dialogue. I could have my mom explain what layaway was to 7-year-old me, and that would also explain it to my reader. That might be kind of a clever way to do that. I tried on several coats. There was a bright purple one Mom liked, but I thought it was too itchy. There was a bright pink one I liked, but Mom thought it was too flashy. Okay, I feel like this whole bit could be us talking back and forth. I might do some dialogue there. Finally, we found a coat we both liked. It was the color of the sky at twilight, purple with hints of pink at its edges, just like the clouds when the sun has just dipped below the horizon. They had the coat in a size 14 girls, so it would still fit in a couple of years. I wore an 810 at the time. I think I want to punctuate this a little different. Maybe that dash instead of those. I think that looks better. It had a hood, and it was $49, just under the $50 limit. Perfect. We put the coat on layaway and came back every week until it was paid off in mid October. I finally got to take my new coat home and wear it to school. I was a tiny bee humming with anticipation. Everything was amazing for 3 days. All the girls in my class told me how pretty my new coat was. I was so proud of my coat. I felt like royalty when I wore it. Then the unthinkable happened. The zipper broke. I don't mean, oops, it got stuck a little. Because I was only 7 and less than coordinated, I had failed to line up the bottom of the zipper in the track. Not knowing better, I had pulled at the fob, not noticing that the teeth were not joining together. The zipper was pulled horribly off track before I realized what I had done. It wouldn't budge. Frantically, I pulled and pulled. My hands began to sweat, and red welts appeared where the now useless pull dug into my hand. Nothing. My breath began to puff in and out rapidly. I was on the verge of hyperventilating. Finally, through sheer force of will, I was able to pull the fob a few more millimeters. I was sure it was about to come free. I forced the fob higher and higher until it stopped right in the middle of my chest. It wouldn't go up, it wouldn't go down. Even my teacher, Mrs. Zimmer, couldn't make it budge. She took me to the coat room and told me to put up my arms so she could pull the coat over my head like a sweater. I knew things were bad, but I was sure Mom would be able to fix it once I got home. When I showed Mom that night, her face twisted with rage. She regarded the damaged coat. She was angry I had been irresponsible and careless with my things. Okay, I think this would be a great place to put what she actually said. It was actually really mean. She tried everything she could think of to unstick the zipper. She rubbed it with dry soap to lubricate the track. It didn't work. She tried to use a bent paperclip to tease the teeth apart and get the zipper to move. That didn't work either. She even resorted to calling my granny, and none of her remedies were effective either. The zipper was ruined, and along with it the next 3 years of my life. By the time my dad got home, I was sobbing. Mom was crying and still yelling. He was the voice of reason. He suggested we could take the coat to the tailor, have him replace the zipper, and the coat would be good as new. Yes, a zipper repair would be expensive, but not nearly as expensive as a whole new coat. This might be a good place to add dialogue as well. I could actually have him talking about what we should do. My tears stopped and I took my first proper breath in 6 hours. The problem would be solved. The next day, Dad dropped the coat off at the tailor. It would be ready in a week. I would be cold and miserable at recess until it was ready. My old hand-me-down coats no longer fit, and Mom had given them to another teacher at her school for her own daughter. That left me with nothing except for the damaged one, but I'd get my beautiful coat back soon. On the day the coat was ready, I went with Dad to the tailor to pick it up. I couldn't wait to get my perfect coat back. The tailor went into the back and brought out the coat. He laid it on the counter. That's when I saw the zipper. The binding was a bright fire engine red, and the heavy brass teeth looked better suited to a duffel bag than a little girl's coat. My dad, not being the sort of person who gave a lot of thought to fashion, was pleased. He thought it looked good and sturdy, like it would never break again. This seems like a great place to actually have him talk, so maybe I'll do that. I feel like could feel my chest getting tight and my eyes beginning to sting, but I knew better than to make a scene in public. I'd be in more trouble if I started bawling. Reluctantly, I put on my now ruined coat and we went home. I was sure that when Mom saw the coat in its present state, she would drive right back to the tailor and demand that a proper matching zipper be put in. I was wrong. Both my parents felt the ugly red zipper would teach me a valuable lesson about taking care of my belongings and about the consequences for what would happen if I didn't. I remembered how big the coat was and how long it would fit me. I realized how long I would have to wear this hideous coat with its hideous zipper. I knew there would be no point in arguing or having a fit. Their minds were made up. This was my fate. I would wear this coat well into 3rd grade, and there was nothing I could do about it. I was so upset that I went to bed without dinner. I cried myself to sleep, holding down my hiccups and howls so no one would hear me. The next day I wore my coat to school. The teasing started as soon as I got on the school bus. You couldn't miss that red zipper in my mauve coat. It might as well have been a flashing neon sign. My cheeks burned with humiliation when they said it was ugly, and I could feel the sharp sting of fresh tears when they said I was ugly for wearing it. But what hurt the most was when the children said my family must be poor if that was the best coat they could buy me. Now, I could add dialogue in a lot of places here, but I feel like this is the most important place in that paragraph. So I don't want to overuse dialogue. I'm going to use it here. The teasing and bullying were brutal. When they watched my face turn red and my bottom lip quiver, it fueled them to continue their cruelty. I figured out I could hide the zipper if I folded my scarf just so, then safety pinned it in place. That kept the other children from seeing the red zipper and remembering to make fun of me. However, there was a price for this safety. I think I want to change this. I knew I wanted to change this. I think I finally figured out how I want to say it. However, you know, I had to pay a steep price for my pride. I could no longer run around and play at recess with the other children. My scarf might move out of place, and that was not a risk I could never take. The zipper would be exposed. The teasing and mocking would start again. Starting in first grade, I sat on the wall by myself at recess and read books. I pretended it was because I liked to read and didn't want to run and play, but that was a lie. I wanted to swing and play kickball, but I wanted to preserve my dignity even more. Who'd have ever thought that something as simple and small as a zipper on a coat could so profoundly change how I felt about myself and how I was treated by my peers? Okay, I know I read for a while there. Let's go back, and I am feeling kind of tired, so I'm thinking maybe I stick with just 3 places. 3 places. If I can get myself through that, I know I'm going to have a better essay than I had before. So let me go back. And I'm thinking about places that I think are the most important. So this was a place I was like, I could just vary the sentence structure by adding a conjunction. So now I have one longer sentence after a bunch of shorter sentences, and I think it sounds a little better. So that's what I mean by change the length. But I also included a lot of places where I thought dialogue could be good. So this part about the layaway, that could be good. This could be okay. This might be a good place because if I put a little bit of humor early on, it'll play up how sad things get later. So let's try that. I'll show you what it looks like. So we'll talk about the bright purple one first. So let's do Mom's dialogue. I like this purple one. You know, back in ancient times, purple was the color of royalty. You could say, Mom said. Now, instead of just saying, but I thought it was too itchy, maybe I just am like, it's itchy. So I could say, I squirmed and scratched. Too itchy. Notice I'm doing the thing where I start new lines for each part of the dialogue. That's just a trick you could potentially do too. So now I could say about the bright pink one. So I like this hot pink one. It's like Barbie and the Rockers. That was like a popular toy when I was a child. I said. My mom was actually pretty funny sometimes. Too flashy, Mom said, frowning. You'll look like a stripper. on a ski trip. The coat was returned to the rack. All right, definitely that sounds a lot better. It's funnier, and I do think that if I can add a little humor early on when things go terrible later, it provides more contrast. I think that's better writing. Okay, that was pretty good. I'm going to scroll down a little further. This was one where I knew I needed to have dialogue. So she regarded the damaged coat like, you are spoiled. This killed me. She said something kind of like this. You are spoiled. You have no appreciation for nice things. You know, I died inside from shame. Man, I feel like I'm going to cry looking at that. Okay, let's keep going. You know, this part with my dad, I could add dialogue here, but I don't know that it's like actually the best place. I mean, it's okay the way it is. Maybe I'll come back to that later. Maybe I'm just going to look at one more place. I think I want to go to this part where the kids were like, what they said to me. And I know exactly who said it too. So, Jamie said the worst thing. Your family must be poor if that's the best coat they can buy you. And I think maybe what hurt so much about it for me was that it was kind of true. This was the nastiest of all because it had at its heart a kernel of truth. She looked so smug sitting there in her expensive rabbit fur coat. Yeah, this girl had affluent parents. I remember that. Okay, let's see if there's anything else. Okay, so I revised for a whole lot of stuff. All right, so I ended up doing, I think, a little bit more than 3, but I didn't do it all. Before I go to do my final copy, you can see there are still some areas I want to look at again. I may or may not revise for them, but at the very least, I know for a fact that after doing these 4 things, this essay is a lot better than it was when I wrote my very first draft. So I encourage you to try all 4 strategies, to do them one after the other, to pick 3 places each time. Do those 3, maybe you end up doing more. So stick with it, go in order, take your time, and don't get overwhelmed. You can do this.